Began with that central image of the statue being found in the water and the character and all the situations sprang from them, from that image. And Greece seemed to be the most likely place where this would all be happening, just based on what research I was doing. And I love to write about place. I also wanted to write about it in a different way than maybe some of the literature I've seen, sort of pushing back against the American abroad tropes a little bit, which I don't know if I've done successfully, but I was interested in. I knew I wanted it to be pre-tech because I knew that she was already an isolated character that I wanted to make more isolated, which sounds a little cruel. There are so many, I think modern writers bump up against the idea of using technology in their plots because so much of what used to be insurmountable can now be figured out through sending a text or an email. Um, and there's also something about it too when you write. I struggle with it when you write in tech, then by the time the book comes out, like the modality is already outdated. That's getting off topic a little bit, but I knew that I wanted it to be pre-tech. And then when I was doing some research on one of the historians that she was inspired by, whose name was Marion True, who worked for the Getty, this was all happening around the early aughts. And so I just peeled back the time a little bit from that. Also, 1999 was a pretty weird time for us all. I think that I wrote one draft of this pretty quickly in frustration. I just wanted to sort of get a draft out. I'm a messy first drafter, and then I'll spend a long time revising. So I would say that the characters sprung up pretty naturally from sort of that quick breeze through, just imagining who would be in the world and landscape. And once I had Theo and that central dynamic there, everything else started to fall into place a little easier. It's so interesting that you bring up romance. For me, it was more about desire and longing and obsession, um, because I think the central romance of the book, I don't know how to say it without spoilers, but I worry that some people would be disappointed in sort of what happens there. But it was kind of important to me that a character doesn't maybe get what she wants. Um, but in terms of crafting mood and atmosphere, those are things that are very, very important to me. And I do think that I am very visual. So as I'm going along and writing a scene, I am thinking about all the senses and trying to get those on the page as much as possible. Part of that was actually going to Greece and doing research. But I traveled to a few like places before that and was drawing on that. I would also, weirdly enough, look up YouTube vlogs and like just pause and look and see sort of what's going on and around there. And that was really helpful. So I went to a couple islands, but Naxos was the one that really stood out to me. And there was a museum there, and it was tiny. And we couldn't, my partner and I went together. We couldn't even really figure out how to get in. No one was really there. Um, and the way the architecture of that museum, the way it was set up, really inspired a lot of the museum that I had conjured on the page. Um, and also there, we got a car and drove up into this little mountain town, which is not really what you think about when you think Greece. You think the white sand beaches, you think the blue dome, and like you're saying, the statues and sort of just the weight of the history. But up in the mountains was so beautiful and so quiet and serene, and it's sort of its own ecosystem. And that was, I just wanted to show different sides of Greece than the classic, typical ones that you'd think of when you think of it in your mind.